And I'm calling the Transportation Committee to order. We are now in a meeting that has four of us transportation people, Mr. Parks, Mr. Labange, Mr. Koretz, and myself, Bill Rosendahl, and Mr. Alicon. Great, there he is. Look at that. We got a full quorum here for that. We got everybody here, and then we also have three members of the Finance Committee. And we have one joint issue that we will be talking about when we go into that. But let's just go with the Transportation Committee. There's a desire to continue for further clarification, item number 7. Would you explain that, Maria, a little bit about the Board of Transportation Commissioners, City Attorney report and the ordinance related to increasing the speed limit on Sherman Way between Viola and Clyburn?
Yeah, that's item 7, and I believe there's some additional information that DOT wanted to find out on that one, and so we'll bring that back when it's ready. If we can continue that.
Colleagues, if we continue that item, please. Seems to be unanimous on that. And then we have on consent. If you want to look at the agenda, folks, suggested on consent are items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
And those are all speed limit adjustments or establishments.
And do we have a motion to go on consent with that?
So ordered. So moved.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Then we have also on consent 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
And those are renewals of temporary preferential parking districts.
Colleagues, any problems with them on consent? No. No. All those in favor? Aye.
Well, I got to move it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got to move it?
Second by Mr. Koretz.
Very good. Mr. Parks had already done it, so it's okay. We got everybody jumping here. All right, so that is now on consent. Everybody in favor of that, or if you're against, say it?
We're good.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are on consent. Okay. All right. Now we have tab 16 in the book, which is take a special joint meeting of the Budget and Finance and the Transportation Committees. And that is, then I got the regular agenda to go back, but I guess you're suggesting we do 15 now? Okay.
Yeah, item 15 on the regular Transportation Committee agenda is the Street Services Report relative to the grant application for the State of California Department of Transportation Safe Routes to School Program, Cycle 9.
Okay, somebody want to talk about that real quickly, colleagues? We'll hear staff and then take questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. Ron Olive, Assistant Director with Street Services. And normally you would see Department of Transportation up here, but who has done the previous coordination lead on the previous cycles for Safe Routes to School, but due to retirements and other staffing issues, we agreed to take a limited role on leading an effort to salvage Cycle 9 for the city this year. And I did want to recognize from our staff, Shirley Lau and Ferdy Chan, who really stepped up and did a great job putting this together with a lot of help from Maria Souza Roundtree. So really the goal was to try to, again, with the limited staffing we had to help out on this, try to spread out equally amongst the council districts, maybe have one project per council district. We looked at trying to reapply for projects that were previously applied for that had all the outreach done and all the detailed technical analysis done, because we really couldn't reinvent the wheel on new projects this time to a great extent. We also looked at, for the most part, trying to limit the scope of work to what street services and street lighting, public works improvements, new sidewalk, access ramps, pedestrian lighting, tunnel lighting, so forth. And I think what we came up with was a pretty good list on attachment A, and it's roughly, let me get that out here. We have 15 projects. I'd like to add one verbally that we had added from Council District 6 yesterday, but 15 projects totaling $8 million. Statewide, there's $24 million available. Each project has a limit of $100,000, and the applications have to be submitted before July 15th, and there's a 90% funding from this grant program, so the city would have to find a 10% match. So we're asking you today to approve the list and authorize us to go ahead and submit the applications, enter into any funding agreements we have to with Caltrans, and work with the other departments and bureaus on the front funding and match funding obligations.
I have a series of questions, just quickly for the record. Question one, how many projects are we typically awarded?
I would say it's been running 2 to 4, somewhere in that range.
How much money would the city need to set aside for front and matching funding?
The match funding, again, 10%, so say we got 4 awards, probably talking the neighborhood of 200,000, maybe a little more if we got lucky. The front funding really would depend on the department who got the award, but that's less of a problem.
Okay, and do we anticipate the city will have any will have the funding available?
Yes.
Is it true that the city will be penalized in this round because of past projects' delivery issues? Is it true that we could be?
Certainly we could be. We have, I wouldn't say had issues in the past. We've had to basically, even though we finished the scope of work, early on we had some right-of-way issues. We had some other issues where we've had to delete some of the scope of work because it wasn't feasible any longer. But I think we've done a good job of keeping up with, the progress on the awards. We're probably a cycle or two
Is it still hanging
behind.
over our head, this penalty business?
To some extent, probably. But right now, we're in construction on Cycle 7 project, so we're not that far behind.
Very good. Do you anticipate a federal safe routes to school call in FY 10-11?
Yes, that would be Cycle 3 on the federal side. I believe that's forthcoming.
When you make a decision on which application to submit, are you doing so based on the greatest need of our schools? For example, children who may have to cross 4 lanes of highway to get to school, non-signalized, signalized intersections, etc. How do you determine it?
What we really did was we've had 2 interdepartmental coordination meetings, and we've also had some limited community outreach, and we've really worked with a number of stakeholders as well as the council office to help us define those priority scopes of work.
And do you also have the coordination between the state, the federal infrastructure and education grant funds we seek? Do they coordinate?
Yes.
Okay. I just make a statement, and then obviously I'll turn it over to colleagues. Colleagues, right now, we might not be able to do a lot because of our budget crisis, but we can take the time to do things better, even if it means applying for less projects. Before the upcoming federal call, we're going to ask DOT and BSS and any of the other relevant agencies to take a look at coordinating our Safe Routes program at the state and federal level to focus on quality applications over quantity, targeting the schools with the greatest needs so that what's best for the children of the city of Los Angeles. And what I will recommend, but I'll wait until your comments, that approve the report and recommendations as amended to include the new projects from CD6 and to clarify that no general funds will be used as matching funds. Additionally, I will then direct the DOT and the Bureau of Street Services to report back with recommendations on how to develop a comprehensive citywide approach for future safe routes to school grant funds that will allow the city to strategically focus on projects at the school with the greatest need. End of my comments. Colleagues?
One thing I didn't quite understand, on your comment in your report, it says because you're taking over the projects that you removed the transportation elements out of the project.
Yes. That's what we try to urge the respective council offices to allow us to do that. The CRA, if you notice on the table, has taken the lead on a few of these projects, and they have traffic consultants on board and what have you. They've been able to include those design elements, the traffic.
Because what I'm concerned about, we've been trying on O'Shea for the last 3 years because there's a train that's going to go right by the school. And part of the approval of the TUC to validate that intersection was the promise that we're going to move forward on the safe return to school kinds of elements. And many of them dealt with traffic and signs and things like that. So if we gut that. We've gone back on a commitment to PUC and to their approval. And secondly, there's an absolute need to have those traffic elements. And what I'm wondering is that whether we should leave the traffic elements in there and go forward on the funding. And because even though many of these projects are $500,000 grants, they may be a cost higher than the $500,000. So you're going to have to find funds elsewhere anywhere in another place to make them work. So I'm just wondering, how much do we weaken the project by taking out the transportation element, particularly when it's a safe return to school?
Now, I'm going to have to defer to someone that knows the details more, but my understanding is the traffic elements for Fauché were being applied for, and I think it's ahead of this process, under the HSIP, or Highway Safety Improvement Program.
We applied several ways because the issue is, and we can't quite figure it out, we thought a train going by a K through 12 school was fairly important to have a safe routes to school program. Yet for 3 years, they've kind of ignored it at both levels. So being that PUC has granted us approval of continuing the Expo line because of these promises, it just bothers us that some of the elements were removed. And the other issue is that when we look at the sheet that you've given us, are these in priority order, or are they just 1 through 15 or city projects?
They're just 1 through 15. There is no priority order. They will all be submitted.
So I was just wondering, how does that, in the sense of removing the traffic element?
Ken Husting with the City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation, Senior Transportation Engineer. Councilmember, specifically eliminating some of the transportation elements obviously does not strengthen the application. With specifically to Fauché, from what I understand, the previous application had transportation elements being a traffic signal, new traffic signal, as well as speed feedback signs. The traffic signal was funded through the HSIP program, so that element is going to be taken care of.
Is that for sure, or is that?
No, that's for sure. What's left over are the speed feedback signs. And what I did clear with my staff, and I did speak to your staff, is that the elements were previously reviewed by LADOT, so therefore it's not additional work for LADOT to go ahead and reevaluate if there's a need for those signs. So the signs could be reincorporated, but there is the caveat that we need, because of the lack of staffing and resources for the department, that it would have to be done by consultant and installed by a contractor. But the elements can go back in the
So
application.
they can put the elements back, because that at minimum pays for the signs, right?
Yeah,
And then we could get a consultant or somebody to install it.
yeah.
So if we can make sure that's included, we'll just keep pushing and hope that one day they approve it, because again, it's all, PUC is expecting those elements to be there.
And that's perfectly acceptable.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen? Mr. LeBon?
When's the train schedule open, Bernard?
Latter 2010 for phase 1 that takes you to Crenshaw.
Is DOT prepared to smother the area with traffic officers to help in this?
That I would have to actually defer to Amir. Is Amir?
Where's the mirror? But I think it should, because it's going to be a big change, and I think this is the same thing happened with the Orange Line. We had to react heavy because it's a new thing coming through the neighborhood.
I could definitely check with Amir Sadati and get back to you.
I don't know about the traffic officer, but I know there's a major funded program by Expo Line for education for every neighborhood and every school along the route, phase 1. So I know they're going through that now. Now, what DOT's plan, I don't know.
Yeah, I just wanted to just throw that out, because I think there's nothing like those officers who help direct the safety.
Close.
Yeah. And then the other issue I just wanted to say, and do you have a compiled list of all the work we've done in the other cycles?
I'm saying,
DOT, because you're taking it over for DOT.
We do have a list of all the previous cycles and all the different elements and projects that have been
Yeah, I think
funded
you
and
should mention
submitted.
that or give that report to council. And I think, I know in our district here, the Bureau of Engineering is doing a project on Cahuenga that's taking care of Toluca Lake Elementary School, which is north of the freeway, and some of the other things too. So there's a lot of positive things we're doing about schools. Just want to thank you. I want to
Absolutely.
comment on Ferdy Chan being one of the greatest of all, of many great city employees who does a great job in your area, Ron Olive, which is so special. And every time I pass Vermont in your district, Bernard, I think of Ferdy and all the work he did for the traffic islands, which used to be a fight to get traffic islands. It used to be like you're bringing in somebody from outer space to try to approve traffic islands. Now we see that as a complement, a traffic calming measure, as well as beautification, so, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Nothing to
Just
add.
one thing. What do you contemplate your source of funds for the matching?
Well, we're looking at Prop C. We know that's very limited, possibly Measure R, gas tax. We don't have it pinpointed yet, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sheriff, I can add one more thing. We talked about adding that one project, for the record, if I can read it in. It's in Council District 6, Sharp Elementary School, $500,000 as well.
So read into the record.
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, anything else?
I move,
Okay, it's moved and second. All in favor?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, with the further amendment to add the speed feedback signs to the Fauché project
Yes.
as well.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we've approved that item. Now, the next
question
thing.
for Maria, real quick though, is that gonna be on both sides of the exposition? Both feedback, both ways, or just one?
No, it's on the north side.
Just the north side where the school is, okay, got it. Thank you. We approved it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, and now that we've moved forward on that, there's a special agenda here. Maria, you want to talk about that?
No, the special meeting of Transportation Committee, the CAO report on the contract amendment with the commercial programming systems.
Want to give us a quick pitch on what this is?
Yes, Angela Berman, CAO.
Yeah,
This
go.
contract amendment, this amendment is for a $1.2 million amendment to provide for software-based services related to the ATSAC and ATCS system. The Metro Call for Projects 2009 awarded DOT about $5.7 million to take the ATSAC system and apply it to the county system. So the contractor will be working on those, and the cost of the amendment will be covered by the grant.
Okay, now, my two questions is, why is this a 2-year contract amendment and not typically a 1-year?
The project, as DOT described, would be approximately 2 to 3 years. So we'll have the contractor on for the first couple of years to do the work.
Does the department anticipate issuing an RFP in the future?
Perhaps the department can speak to that. I know that this contractor does provide some proprietary knowledge on the ATSAC system, so my initial response is I don't think so, but the department can speak to that.
Good afternoon, Varesh Jarayan, Department of Transportation. If we do have a need to go beyond the full 5 years, then we just have to consider at that time whether we want to develop a scope of work and go out to hire a consultant rather than just continuing with the commercial programming system contract. But we recognize that this extension would be the last extension or the only extension to this contract. And we anticipate that we will be completing with the work within the 2 years.
Well, very good to hear that. Mr. Koretz, any questions? Mr. Labange?
I just think it's extremely important. 3 things you can do about traffic, what are they? The 3 E's. Education, engineering, and enforcement. And on the education factor, many people sit back from the intersection and they don't hit your loops. Your loops are very important. So the next time you're sitting around across the street talking about things to do on an educational thing, because often I'll be next to somebody and I'll say in a nice, gentle way, you got to hit the loop because it's all under control at City Hall East. I don't give it to City Hall credit, I give it City Hall East, because that's where it all is, because people don't know where to stop. And sometimes your loops are deep into a crosswalk, and then I don't want to get a ticket for passing the limit line. You see that around town, so
That's why we have double set of loops. Right.
Right. But anyway, education is important on that issue. Hit the loop so it trips the sign.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Alarcon? Mr. Parks?
Let me just, I'm clear, this extension is merely to tie the 2 systems together?
Yes, that's, yes.
It has no impact on previously approved intersections?
No. This is strictly connecting the two traffic management centers, the city and the county.
Very good. Thank you.
At county city locations or throughout? At county city
At,
locations?
well, the county has a traffic management center in Alhambra that controls traffic signals within the jurisdiction of the county.
Right.
And we wanted to link the two centers together, the ATSAC Center and the county center.
Very good.
So that on one map, you can see the traffic condition and the signal condition, hardware condition for both the ATSAC system and the county. And that comes really useful at the jurisdictional boundary.
But there's like 27 cities that touch city borders in Los Angeles or thereabouts. At those intersections, are they our intersections, or are they sometimes Santa Monica intersections?
Sometimes it's a joint signal, but with this system, it's the county, if any of the agencies have a traffic management center, like the ATSAC system, they are required to link their system to the county.
Right.
So when we link to the county, then we can see all of
See
these
that.
neighboring jurisdictions.
Good, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Very good.
And now we have one public comment card, because we're going to go to the special joint meeting of the Budget and Finance and do item number 1, which is tab 16 in the book. But we have a public comment card for that transportation budget. Jamie Cabral, is that right?
Did the committee approve this item?
Pardon me?
Did the committee just approve the contract
Oh,
item?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody spoke on this one. Unless Mr. Alec comes. At this point, no.
Okay.
Yeah, please, then you flip the tape, sure. He's going to flip the tape first. We're flipping the tape is to the Transportation and Budget and Finance special item, special meeting.
And just for the record, that's just the CAO with CLA report on the 2010-11 Proposition A funding for the charter bus program.
And we have a quorum of both committees, Budget and Finance as our chair, Mr. Parks, member Mr. Koretz, and member Mr. Rosendahl, and we have the full committee of Transportation. So you got quite a gaggle here. Please, your name for the record.
My name is Jamie Cabral. I'm the Chief of Interpretation and Education for the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. I'm here on behalf of Joe Edmiston. One of the barriers to visiting parks is lack of public transportation. The Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority has been the leader in Los Angeles region in addressing the lack of access to public spaces for urban residents. The majority of beautiful parkland in the Santa Monica Mountains is not on public bus routes. Unless you have a car, you can't get there. For over 25 years, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and MRCA have been working together to provide buses to these particular spectacular parks to groups and organizations from underserved communities with the Recreational Transit Program, RTP. Those served include seniors, low-income families, community groups, students, and the disabled. Last year, almost 30,000 visitors were provided access to parkland through this program. RTP is funded by the County of Los Angeles, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, the National Park Service, and user donations, but the biggest contributor has been the City of Los Angeles Charter Bus Program. The proposed cuts to the charter bus program are fairly devastating to our efforts to ensure that public parkland is accessible to all people from all parts of the greater Los Angeles region. The elimination of these funds will reduce our program budget by about 64% or so and eliminate all but a few programs for the residents of the City of Los Angeles. Lastly, I do want to thank all of you who fought to keep some portion of the charter bus program. It is our hope that the council allocations will continue to enable underserved communities to have access to our mountain parks. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it very much. If we could have staff come up, City Administrative Officer and Chief Legislative Analyst, and give us this joint report on Proposition A funding for the charter bus program.
Yeah, I think
We
I
talked
can.
about it, all of us in council, the obvious importance of this program for various community groups, church groups, senior groups, youth groups, school groups, all kinds of groups. And frankly, one of the nicest things we get are thank you notes from people thanking us for giving them an opportunity they wouldn't have any other way. So we went through the budget process. Where are we today and what are we doing now?
Why don't I kick it off real quickly? The direction was for, on June 4th, when you heard the Prop A discussion and made the significant changes that you did, there was a motion that was put in from Councilmember Reyes that directed the CLA and CAO to find $1.5 million to reinstate the council's portion of the charter bus program. The charter bus in previous years has been about $4.5 million. This recommended $1.5 million, again, just for the council. It further directed the CLA to come back with a policy to limit the trips, what type of trips would be offered. And we went back through all the options we thought were available in terms of funding sources, and the only thing we could come up with was the unappropriated balance for future reserve capital. So if you take that out, unfortunately, it does make the deficit in 2012-13 much more than it would be. We were estimating about $700,000, and it's probably going to bump it up to at least $2 million. So that's the only option you really have in terms of the funding sources for the program.
And so moved. And is there a second? But then we'll get into conversations.
Well, I want to, yeah, but
Okay, there is a second
yeah.
before you speak.
All right.
What we've
That
done.
doesn't include the conservancy.
No, it does not.
Right. What it does, and let me explain this, the 1.5 million covers the city council's involvement in the program. The rest of that money, we're not funding, including the conservancy. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The initial 4.5 million was comprised of funding for council offices, funding for the mayor's office, funding for the housing authority, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, and some other various programs. But this report only talks about the 1.5 million that will be allocated to council offices for about 100,000 per office.
Okay, colleagues, Mr. LeBon, did you want to?
Let me ask you a question. Mr. Financial Chair of the city, Mr. Parks, how much money is hanging with the Department of Neighborhood Councils?
I think that money that we thought was hanging is going to be more expensive because Mr. Krikorian's motion is not to dissolve it.
Yeah, but how much is there?
Well, there's little there because you're talking about, he wants to maintain it as a structure.
I got it, but is it not the organization for the department, but the money that is unspent by neighborhood
I
councils?
think the money that was.
I heard a figure about 8 million, 9 million. Is that correct? Does anyone hear that? Maria, you're in the know. You're in the CLA's office.
Not of the done, no.
The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Chair, is that is there a way to use that money that's sitting there, because it all helps people, it gets people around, and I think the greatest investment in public land is to share that public land. So my question would be, if we could ask the CLA to look at other pots that may be sitting there that could be used for a very needy cause. You could said something so poignant, Mr. Chair Rosendahl, the thank yous that you get. And it's an outstanding program, whatever we do, when we get people the opportunity to see the city. And I'm only going back to when I was a kid in this city, when you got on a school bus and you went to San Pedro, or you went to the County Arboretum, or you went to the Natural History Museum in Expo Park. It is a life-lasting memory. And at a recent graduation, just to let you know, of children from Charles S. Kim School, they remembered in their, 4 students spoke, 3 of the 4 remembered their trip that they took to Griffith Park, which the program related to, which could be anywhere. They just remembered that trip that they got. So,
Thank you very much. The $4.5 million.
I want to ask Maria to look at that, if that's all right.
We'll go with the motion. The $4.5 million, how was it broken down?
In 2009-10, the 4.5 million is broken down as follows. Council offices received approximately 1.8 million. The Department of Recreation and Parks, about 700,000. The Housing Authority, 400,000. The Mayor's Office, 500,000. Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, 200,000. And the various others are smaller amounts that create the balance.
I see. Taking Mr. Labange's comment about trying to find the money to keep the whole thing going, that'll be a separate discussion, and we could go report back on that. But staying on the 1.5 for the council offices, Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, I would echo the point about the conservancy in addition, if there's some way to find that relatively modest amount of money. I know Mr. Cardenas in one of our other committees, when we were discussing the Mountains Conservancy, said his greatest objection to funding them is that we don't make enough use of those properties by getting folks that that don't live anywhere near them, particularly school children, to get access to those properties. And so that is the one thing I'd be happy if we were able to find an additional pot of money elsewhere to add to the program.
Karen, could you come up for a minute? Do you have knowledge of the amount of money that's banked in neighborhood councils? Because I know we had rollover and different things like that, but I lost track.
No, I don't have the information about the rollover funds, but what was in the budget for done transfer was roughly like 1.6 million, but I don't think that's the what you're talking about here.
But the money I'm concerned about is that it gone unused, that you could...
And roll over.
You could roll it over for 2 years or something?
Right. Well, we'd have to get the answer. I don't have it offhand.
Let me just say, colleagues, on this dollar amount, two things I think we have to think about is that if we go with 1.5 this year, it's a one-time source, and then what do you do next year? We're like 30 million over in Prop A, 300 million over in 10 years, and just by the fact that we delayed implementing the fee increases from July 1st to August 1st cost us about 9 million, and it will be even more as we go forward and implement it. So what we approved in the council could be as much as $12 million to the deficit before we even get started. Now we're going to add another 1.5 to that. And then for the next 2 years, you may not feel it. But in 2 years, your $700 million deficit is now between 2 and 3 million. So what I would suggest, because we don't know where the money's coming for next year, what I would suggest is that we consider next year by going with, rather than 1.5, that we go with half of that and go to a 50-50 program and things of that nature, so that you are addressing the need, but on the other hand, you're not putting a larger deficit down the road. Because Prop A has no general fund subsidy, and what you will eventually do, lines and dash service that you really think is important, will begin to dissipate if the deficit continues. So it's a choice of charter buses this year versus cutting a line 2 years down the road. So I think you have to look at it in a larger sense, because you're creating a deficit where there's no a source of money to replace, and you're creating a 1-year supplement for charter buses, and there's no expectation to fulfill that next year. Mr. Allen.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Park's comments with regard to this being a one-time opportunity. So the way I look at it is, if we're looking at it as a one-time expenditure, then we just roll the dice and try to find the money next year. But if we're going to reduce the program to the extent that you're talking about, which would be just about 75%, when you
50%.
well, it's 75% when you consider the other fund, like the Conservancy is 220,000, they're not getting anything. So it's more like 75% reduction. Then I think it's an issue of equity, because the way we've been running the program is to provide this service to all council districts equitably, or not even equitably, but equally, which is very different than equitably. But if we're going to cut the program down, then I would say that we should do it for those who are least able to pay for a bus. So I don't think we can just cut it in half, because my district organizations that use the bus service would not be able to pay the other half. They just wouldn't be able to. So you're basically cutting the service from poor people. And I know that's not your intent, but that's what will happen. Just like with the events money, when we cut it, we're eliminating events in local communities. I'm struggling to put on a 4th of July event for 50,000 people in my district right now. So I think if we're going to go in the direction of cutting it, then I would say that we should tie it to precincts where the poverty level is the highest. And I don't know that we want to get that complicated. So I just as soon add the 1.5 and and take it from the neighborhood councils that didn't spend it, and I say that as a former chair of the committee. If they didn't spend the money, this is not a time for us to be, saving money. Take it from there, come back next year and see if we need Prop
If you're
C.
taking it from there, I have no concern. If you take it from Prop A.
Yeah. Well, if you say it's 1.6, I say take the whole 1.6 and put it in the bus program, give 100,000 to the Conservancy, but...
Well, what was, the 1.6 was the amount that was put into the Community Development Department budget for the transfer of Dunn, and some of that's been
I'm
taken
sorry.
back. I was
The
looking...
unspent funds.
Yeah, the unexpended appropriations, and I'm not sure this is the rollover, was about 1.8 in the budget. but
Oh, then
I'd
we
have
can
to
cover the
verify-
Conservancy.
Have to verify that.
Well, let's not do anything. How about if we don't do anything, but I would propose that we ask staff to review the rollover money, or the unspent rollover money in the community, in the neighborhood council program, to support the
Mr. Smith.
bus program to include not just the 1.5 million for the council offices, but also the 220,000 for the Conservancy.
If I could interrupt for just one quick second, Mr. Smith has now joined us, and so we have a full complement of council colleagues here. Mr. Smith, for your awareness, we're on the item that is the joint meeting of Budget and Finance and Transportation, which has to do with the funding of the charter bus program. And in that context, staff was recommending 1.5 million to the 15 council offices, 100,000 per office, not funding the rest of the 4.5 million due to budgetary situations, which impact the mayor's $500,000, impacts the 220 from the Conservancy that uses it, and a group of other groups that add up to 4.5 million.
The Prop A, yeah.
This is Prop A money. Okay? And then the discussion has sort of talked about how do we support the other groups? Do we come back? Do we find other revenue streams? And we go from there. Mr. Labange.
Yeah, I see our friends from the Dash DOT there. I got to ask them a technical question. Is any of this money part of this program, or has been?
Jim Lefton with the Department of Transportation. The charter bus program has historically used 100% Proposition A funds.
The question is, what time does Dash start in the morning?
Dash generally starts around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, and what time does it end?
It generally ends around 6:30, 7 o'clock at night.
And if you shaved a little of that off, could you ever look at that? Because I look at every Dash bus. When you have a wraparound at advertising, it's tough to see the heads in there. But if you could look at shaving some of that service, I will tell you, members, there is nothing more impressive for a service to the city than putting children, seniors, or others on a bus and giving them an experience. And this money is very important. And our partners with the Conservancy or other entities, Rec-Ed Parks, are extremely important. So I would want to fight for this charter bus program, absolutely. And as Mr. Alarcon said, we deal it right now, and whatever we have to do to figure out in the future, we figure out in the future, because this is an experience. I would think there's other things this is more valuable than a lot of other things that we do, as giving people an experience in the city.
I want to clarify, Mr. Labange, I just want to be clear. What I'm suggesting is we take the unspent money from the neighborhood council program, which is quite different than one-time expenditure out of Prop C.
Okay, but I also want James to look at shaving the hours, see whether it's whatever the cost could be, to look at that, be different managers. And I will tell you something. We got involved with busing and Dash because RTD, prior to MTA, stopped doing things. We got involved with after-school programs because LA Unified stopped doing things. So we're involved with this now, and it's very passionate because it's an experience. I would rather see MTA push them to do more stuff and have DOT worry about moving traffic safely through ADSAC systems than running a busing program of that, other than the charter program, because there's so many dual lines that happen to be there. That being said, I'm not going to argue the point, other than I think you see what I mean about this very important charter program, the experience that people are given when they get on a bus and go somewhere. It makes no sense to have a park unless you get the public there.
Are we still on my time?
No, I think it was on my time, and then I asked you a question.
No.
No, check it, Madam
was
Clerk,
recognized by the
Mr.
chair.
Clerk, whose time are we on?
I was recognized by the
Who's
chair.
done?
Cool. Everything's cool.
I'd rather debate who was supposed to speak, but, no, we agree.
Yeah.
My only point is that we're not using Prop C. My suggestion is that we first explore the unspent money of neighborhood councils rather than go to Prop C right away.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
We're on
And
Prop
next
A.
year, we may have to go to Prop C. In other words, we may get 2 bites of the apple, but or Prop A.
We're dealing with
We'll
Prop
worry
A.
about that next year.
And here's the discussion point. Do we approve the 1.5 million as recommended by staff from Prop A and have a second motion that says, let's see if we can get the rest of that 3 million for the other groups through various strategies that we might want to look at? That could be the way we want to do it. Okay,
No.
what's the first motion?
I think that from my perspective is that if you get funds from the council office, the conservancy, you've done one heck of a job. If you tie it to neighborhood councils, you've done an outstanding job. If you do not spend Prop A and put it into more deficit, you've done a really outstanding job. But you can't afford $4 million under any conditions of going back and replicating what we had. But I would suggest, as Richard said, go look at money that has not been spent by the neighborhood councils. If that's your first source, that would be the easiest way to deal with it. But Prop A, you will be in 2 years cutting invaluable services that you believe in, that are dashed, and poor people, you're just delaying it for another.
And this money goes directly to the neighborhood.
Mr. Smith?
I'm just listening.
Okay, while he's listening, my suggestion is this, colleagues, whatever you want to do, my suggestion would be that if we feel this way, we should continue the item and see what kinds of funds we can pull together. I'm more than willing to take the 1.5 out of Prop A and keep our city programs by our council members, but it doesn't seem to be enough of a consensus here. We want to go for what we can get from other pots and other strategies. So if that's the will of the group, then we would continue the item.
Well, I would say, because time is not on our side,
Right.
I would rather go right to council with whatever we recommend.
Yeah.
And let the council decide, because everyone is passionate about this program. I also think it gives us time. Now, I may be wrong, but someone told me there was $8 or $9 million of unspent rollover money from neighborhood councils. And I don't know if anybody in the sound of my voice hears that, but have you heard that at all, Mr. Parks?
That was a year or so ago. I just don't have a handle on it.
Right, and I
Where we
think
are now. So let's just say if we take 10,000 from each of the 90-plus neighborhood councils, that's $800,000. It gets us up the road a little, if I could use that
Well,
term.
I'm totally against all of that discussion at this particular moment about neighborhood councils and where we could get money from for this program. I'm not in favor of taking it from neighborhood councils until we, A, understand what we're talking about and what neighborhood councils are effective and what the issues may be. We don't know what we're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about.
You don't know how
and
much money is sitting there. You don't know which neighborhood councils have spent it or which have rolled it over. These are big issues for those people in those neighborhood councils, and we need that data and information if we want to talk about going to those monies, if they exist, and taking it. I have no problem with the notion of going there, but we obviously need to know what we're talking about, specifically what neighborhood councils, what rollover funds, what extra funds there may be for a program like that. So I'm more than willing to say continue the item until we do that, or if we want to move quickly now on this particular one, great, or take the whole thing to council. Any way you want to go, folks, we got to make some decisions if we want to keep the charter bus program going.
Why can't we present all 3 options to council and let staff come back?
We sure can, but staff has a lot of work to do to get it all laid out, and then you're going to see the
Well, they'll
place
have
packed.
more work to do if they have to come to committee and then back to council. I mean, come on, you're doubling their work. Why don't we just have them, they're going to have to do all 3 analysis anyway. Let them come back with 3 options and let the council decide on the floor.
And if we could maybe get it by Tuesday. The reality is, we made a commitment to have this resolved before July 1st.
Right,
That's the point.
right.
Council members, I think we can probably in very short order have information on the neighborhood council rollover funds. But you might recall that during the earlier part of this year, there was an effort to take some savings from the neighborhood councils. There was roughly about a $1.3 million amount that was proposed to be swept from the neighborhood councils. It would require a policy change by you to actually change the rollover period. But remember, when that action was taken, it was referred back to committee. When it finally came back, that $1.3 million savings was significantly reduced because neighborhood councils came forward and said that they had allocated funds. But we can certainly report back to you, whether it's in this venue or in council, in rather short order, how much funding is remaining within the neighborhood councils. And we can probably even get it to you by fiscal year. And that could be done, as I said, either here or in council.
Right, and also, Mr. Alacon, many of the schools may not necessarily be in a area. There's a variety of challenges within the population of a school, wherever it is. So, equal amount.
When we say rollovers, they're all thinking of the same deal. That's the money that they have not spending it from year to year, that we can accumulate 3 years.
And every neighborhood council is different. They've expended their monies differently. Some have actually spent their annual allocation. There are some that have accumulated amounts. That's correct.
If we do schedule this for council, when will we schedule it, Marie?
John White, City Clerk, this is already place held for this Friday.
This Friday.
Why don't you move it to Tuesday?
Tomorrow.
That's correct.
Would staff have it all together for that, or would you prefer to go to the following Tuesday? Following Tuesday?
Or Wednesday.
You all pick a date, and then we need to notify, let's say next Wednesday, okay? Next Wednesday, that gives you a week. Okay, and we need to notify neighborhood councils that their monies might be an issue. So that
They might be asked to contribute to this very worthy program.
want them at the room to be aware of this and to be part of the discussion. And anything else that might be up there for a hard look at funding, we need to know what that is with enough time, so if it's impacting this or that or something else, people will know enough about the issue to know.
Mr. Chair, are we giving direction just for the 1.5, or are we also asking for the 200,000 for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy?
I think the consensus, and we'll hear what Mr. Alacon and Mr. Smith are saying, is that we want to look at all potential opportunities for funding, period, including the mayor's money, the Conservancy's money, and others, to see if we can get up to the $4.5 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I don't know if I heard that. I'm certainly not looking for that.
But what are we looking for as a group?
Ideally, I heard a lot of consensus about the Mountains Conservancy. I'd be looking for the 1.7.
I'll round it off to $2 million, so it cuts it in half. What do you just do that? Because you have some very important programs of LA's best.
No, I think the issue was about 1.7, 1.5 for council offices. And if I understand it, 2 for conservatives.
And you're conflicted as hell.
1.7 plus.
But in my analysis, if you do $10,000, if you have $10,000 per 90 neighborhood councils, that's about $900,000. So if you cut that in half and do 5,000, you could get to the 2 million mark. I would just say that, which would include that, through my analysis.
But the administrative overhead would be
Say it
ridiculous.
again?
The administrative overhead or something like that would be ridiculous. And look at all the fraud and abuse that's already taken place with neighborhood council money.
No, it would be a request through our action of council to delete a shared sacrifice from neighborhood councils, their allocation of $500 or $1,000, which would add up to whatever the total is, or whatever the total would be. I would just say if you hit for $2 million, if you care about this program, and I'm Sharon, very emotional about it because this is what enlightens people of the city. More people who get on our charter bus programs have a good feeling about the city than anything else we do. So.
Okay, let me just make this comment for the record, just so we again understand what we're talking about. Council offices would be getting roughly $1.5 million, assuming we had the whole pot. Department of Rec and Park, Mr. Labange, gets $736,000, and Rec and Park has programs for kids too, okay? The Housing Authority has $441,000 on this. The Mayor's Office, $526,000. Then you have the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy at $220,000. You have activities for retarded children of $36,000. You have other trips for disabled individuals for $58,000, disabled buses for disabled individuals, another $73,000. So you're looking at a combination of projects that are all worthwhile. And the issue is, how much do we want to fund and where do we want to get the money from? So if the discussion is going to be about just two of them, just appreciate some of the others that you're not supporting. That also makes sense. Colleagues, anything you want to say about this?
But I think to be consistent with the motion, is that I think we made the council approved 0. Reyes came up with a motion for 1.5 specifically for council, so pretty much eliminated those others. A verbal motion was made today to say consider conservative. So you're at 1.7 plus. But you can't afford $4 million. There's no way that you, under any scenario, can you find $4 million.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Parks, but when you look at the other programs, that includes disabled individuals, disabled buses, well, who says they're better or not better than the Conservancy? I mean, they're all relevant in terms of supporting young people in needs. So I'm not going to buy the politics of the Conservancy over the Rec and Park Department and these other groups that also serve groups. Why would you separate the Conservancy out?
Because they're here.
Yeah, well, that's not enough.
But again, you can't get the $4 million.
I understand that, and that's where we need to have a robust discussion among our colleagues, how far we want to go, please.
Just a quick point, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, but I just want to reiterate. You're talking about a number of different groups that currently get funding now and trying to make difficult decisions about who might get the funding and who might not. With the scenario that's laid out by the CLA and CEO, where the council offices only would receive the $1.5 million, those groups can come to the respective council offices and request trips, and you can make the decision which trips you want to award funding for vis-a-vis any other trips in your area. So that might be a way for allowing for trips for all the groups, but have them funneled through the council offices.
It's a very good point. Appreciate that. Colleagues, any comments on that?
Yeah, except we cut 23,000 out of our budget. So we're gonna expand services, but we cut the budget.
It will reduce, but if you're talking about adding additional funding sources, you could augment your accounts too.
I understand what you're saying, but you're wrong.
Okay.
It doesn't work that way. You can't add 2 and 2 and come up with 10.
Colleagues, anybody else?
Into a budget finance committee meeting.
Okay, all right. I'm going to make a motion. If I don't get a second, it's fine. I move that we take the $1.5 million as discussed by the CLA and CAO, that the discretionary power allows in us electeds, all 15 of us, the ability to make decisions as to which charter bus projects would get covered in our district. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Koretz.
I have a friendly addition.
Please.
I'd like to add $500,000, ask them to search for $500,000 to take care of the Conservancy and other organizations.
You're going to pay it.
That's okay.
You're past $4 million now.
No, but I mean, we're looking at these other pots. Can we look at that?
But the other pots, you have to realize that you do not have unlimited amount of money.
Right.
Why don't we take whatever's in the neighborhood council fund and shift it into the council budget, whether it's 1.8 or 1.5, whatever it is, and then we got to split it up with everybody.
Okay, I have a second for that first motion, and we could also have other motions, too, we could deal with from this committee meeting right now. Is there, can we take a vote on that one motion
Mr.
first?
Chair,
We can do others, yes.
Can I clarify on your motion, is there detail on which pot we're using to fund it, or just that we're...
It's coming out of what they proposed.
Prop A?
Prop A.
Okay.
But it puts the discretionary power in each of the council members' office to decide which gets the priority. Is it the little school down the street, or the Conservancy project, or the disabled, or whatever? It just puts more on our shoulders. All right. Is there any more comments on this motion?
Just give that as a direction that they can
Yeah.
respond to that.
Yeah.
And I believe you wanted us to come back with the rollover amounts, and maybe none of the numbers that we were talking about.
Very
So I
good.
just want to make that
Very
clear.
good.
The 4 things you responded by Wednesday.
We got the check.
Are we comfortable enough for that and just go forward with this, not make a particular motion?
Right now.
Is that how we all feel on this one?
What's that?
Oh, it's okay. Okay, so Don.
So
That's what happens.
So the report is going to council from the joint committee with no recommendation and then additional information to be provided. Is that
Providing
correct?
options of
Wait,
finding more money is what we could.
I thought the committee approved the CAO-CLA recommendations.
That was a
with
motion.
additional-
There was no,
I got
I didn't hear it
three votes on
approved.
that, I think, with a.
Okay, first of all, in committee, there aren't really, as a mechanism for motions. You send reports, you can send communications, you can send a majority, you can send minority report. So those three votes can go to council as a minority report of the joint committee. Additional reports can go forward, other members can vote no. So there's different things you can do here. Besides, if you want your report to move forward, Mr. Rosenthal can. There can also be a minority report with other recommendations. And do what?
No, I think it's great. No, this is a very healthy discussion on a very serious issue affecting all of our people. So why don't we just put the options out there like Mr. Parks was saying, okay?
No recommendations?
No recommendations. But remember the questions you heard from my colleagues.
You didn't hear that, John.
See where you can get. How will that work for you?
Say it again, Mr. Rosenthal?
How would that work for you, what we just said?
To submit the report without recommendation?
As to these four,
You could do that and also request the direct, typically it's submit that recommendation if there is an agreement and it's like an even number. But you could do that, that's fine. I'll agree with that.
We have that recommend a bunch of motions.
You recommend their budget motion?
Up to 6 motions.
Bunch of motions, he said.
Okay. Additional request for report backs.
Would it be cogent for us to make
I
a
know about
determination, all right, whatever that word is, to us to support your original motion, but in the meantime, I'm going to look with my staff outside the box, so to speak, to find out any recommendations that we could add next Wednesday. Does that make it easier to move forward? Okay?
That's not,
I'm asking,
yeah, that's not a motion. You're
Well-
going to do that, fine.
well, I'm trying to extract...
Well, I've developed a very honest discussion about how we feel about this.
Recommendation.
I have a motion on the floor that said the 1.5 should be in the control of the council offices, take the hit, and look at other things. That was a motion. Mr. Corrett seconded it.
As a minority report.
And
Okay.
so if you're in favor of it,
As
say
a
aye.
minority report.
As a
Yes.
report.
Yes.
I don't care.
Oh, no, it has to be a minority report. It does matter.
Okay.
It does matter.
Well, I mean, what matters is what the 15 of us.
get it to the council right away.
Yeah. So let's get it all to the council.
Well, is there another minority report with other recommendations?
Excuse me, can't the report indicate that there was a discussion that suggested
Absolutely.
a variety of options, describing those options, and let the council decide?
We could have one report that goes forth with that recommendation.
Very cool.
And we could ask for report backs for everything you asked for today.
I think they got all the
Okay,
recommendations.
let me
Just
rewind.
from my
if I
review,
can do.
and
Okay,
also press
can
the
you
CLA,
remind us something?
what,
No, rewind.
yes.
You wanted, the options you're talking about are Prop A, which is what's in the CAO and CLA report. You wanted to look at the, any rollover funds that may be available through neighborhood councils. And then those are the only two funding options I've heard. Were there others that you wanted? Okay.
Well,
so we'll
you
bring
can
those
have the
back.
caveat, if you can think of any other suggestions of what makes sense, like Mr. Labange is thinking out of the box, so let's get whatever thinking we can get that comes from staff with other options, if there are any. There aren't? There aren't.
Move that Tom be forced to think outside the box.
Yeah. And we're looking for 1.7 is what he's saying. Everybody's, okay, end of discussion on that.
So you're approving the report with a request for a report back from the CLA on those three funding sources.
we're not approving it.
You're not approving, are you not, okay.
No recommendation.
No recommendation.
Okay,
Just what you said.
very
before.
good, thank you.
Get it all put out there. Oh, it's going to be a long meeting next Wednesday.
We move that Tom goes back in the box.
Yeah.
I want to amend that to say any math must add up to the number, not 10.
I say add up, no 2 plus 2 is 10? Got it.
Okay, thank you so much on that issue. You got your work cut out for you. Obviously, we'd like to save all 4 million of the program, but we're going to save whatever we can. Appreciate the Conservancy coming and stepping to the plate. You did great. So that was the joint meeting, and now we've adjourned the joint meeting, but Transportation still has one more issue to talk about.
That brings us to item number 14 on the regular Transportation Committee agenda, which is a Weezer Perry motion instructing DOT and the Department of Public Works and others to prepare and submit a Tiger 2 grant application for the downtown LA streetcar project and historic Broadway corridor.
Can we make, what are we on, 14? We should just say this to the mayor's task force. There's nothing we can do with it. About 14? Yeah, the mayor's task force is looking at the city.
Staff, come on up real quickly on this.
What can we do with a $75 million motion?
We got a $75 million motion, says Mr. Parks. Come on, let's have a quick hit on this. Staff?
I think the CAO and the mayor's office who've been leading the working group on the Tiger 2 can come up and give a quick presentation on what's happened, and then CD14 is here to respond on the project specifically.
Yeah, very good, very good, very good. And before Mr. Clark speaks, Mr. Parks, you were making a comment.
I said, from the way I look at it, we have no ability, in my judgment, to deal with a $75 million motion. It would appear that this motion we should request the mayor's task force to include this in their discussion as they're developing the citywide list of priorities.
Yes, sir.
The easiest, because there's no way, no matter what we do, we can't push it into the priorities, and we can't find $75 million. So we're going to ask the mayor's office, would they include it in their discussions when they create the citywide list?
Correct, and that's what Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations in the Mayor's Office, that's what we've been doing. If you are interested, though, we're prepared to give you a little bit of background on this Tiger 2 grant as well as the processes that we've been using.
Have you already gotten this motion?
Yes.
Okay, so it's being considered?
Yes.
Okay, then let me just hear your report, and I got a bunch of questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, as you remember, Tiger 1 was part of the ARA funding. It was $1.5 billion of discretionary funding by the Secretary of Transportation. They received 1,400 applications totaling $60 billion worth of projects, so it was oversubscribed by 40 times the amount. Within California, there were 4 projects that received funding, 2 in Northern California, 1 in San Diego, and the only other one was one that was out in San Bernardino called Colton Crossing. There was no funding that was done anywhere here in the basin. But because of the fact that this was so popular, the Congress and the appropriations and the President put in money, $600 million for a Tiger 2. And that money is $600 million is $400 million of discretionary funding for grant programs, similar to what Tiger 1 was. It also includes $25 million for administration programs for DOT, and it includes $35 million that could be used for planning grants, and I'm going to come back and touch on that a little bit in transportation planning. And then $140 million of it is to be used for rural projects only. So the portion that we're looking at for discretionary grant is about $400 million nationally. And as I said, these programs were well oversubscribed. We think that, and we're trying to do there is a pre-application process that is due on July 16th, and then following that, there will be a screening, a review process, and they'll narrow it down, and there'll be applications, people will be invited to make applications by August 23rd. The application process is pretty rigorous. There are a lot of, besides what we would be considering, there are a lot of other projects. Like I said, this is very popular and oversubscribed. As I found out already, the Port of Long Beach is planning to put in a grant proposal for $20 million for a project within the port. Orange County Transportation Association is doing a freight rail project with BNSF and Railroad between the Los Angeles County line and Fullerton to add another third track line. The Alameda Corridor is putting in a grade separation project that they put in under Tiger 1 that they didn't get funding for. The Riverside County Transportation Commission is also putting in a TIFIA grant, which is a financing one for the State Route 91 to add a hot lane to it. Caltrans is considering going after money for the positive train control. And the MTA is deciding today at their meeting right now at 2:30 to decide what projects they want to submit to. So there's going to be a lot of interest. Here within the city, we've developed a process which I'd like to have Camilla Fong with the CAO's office talk about as to how we would assess and evaluate the projects that we would think that we would submit.
All right, back in...
Your name for the record?
Oh, sorry, Camilla Fong from CAO. Towards the end of April, we began meeting in a working group to actually discuss 4 upcoming grant solicitations centered around sustainable communities, transportation-oriented design, that sort of thing. And so the first opportunity to come up was Tiger 2. And so interested stakeholders from various departments have been meeting on a weekly basis to bring forward their projects and determine which of the grant programs seem to fit their project the most. So we've been meeting and trying to narrow down and see if there's ways to consolidate, to kind of collaborate together so that we can put together the most competitive type of application.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that, I've mentioned this a couple times at ad hoc is that there's this new way that the federal government is looking at breaking down silos and having departments in the federal agencies work together, and this is part of it. Within the Tiger 2, there's actually $35 million for planning money, but there's also a HUD Sustainable Communities Planning grant for $40 million as well, and they're looking at combining those 2 pots of money together. So in looking at these projects that we want to do for Tiger 2, we're trying to look at ways that we can get the biggest bang for the buck, as well as showing that we have interdepartmental cooperation, that we have housing, transportation, environmental elements in our proposals, as well as showing that we're working regionally. These projects under Tiger 2 need to be regional projects of regional or national significance. Our expectation is that given the amount of money that's available, $400 million, there may only be 1 project for this entire region that we get, and that the amount of, I heard this morning that the amount of these projects could be as little as $10 to $15 million. The administration plans to, I think, use these projects as a way to help for the November elections by making sure that the projects are spread around where they can do the most good. And that's the reality of what we're dealing with. So, the streetcar project is a good project. It's done well within the working group, but there are other projects as well. The port has a project also. There was a project that was being discussed.
He just has a couple of questions, so if I could, Mr. Chair, if I could.
1 second. Just finish your point.
Well, it's just that we do have a process in place. We are trying to not only, and the advantage of having the working group is that different departments come together and share ideas so that when they first came together, everybody had a project, but it was just involved their department. And what we're trying to do is develop this sort of cross-departmental where we can maximize and present ourselves in the most favorable light to the federal government to say, oh, we've got a project that impacts transportation, housing, and others.
So when you look at our priorities and we look at the competitiveness, and you mentioned some of the other places, is this a particular project that you think in a competitive world is a good one?
Well, in the first round of Tiger, streetcars did very well.
They did.
The port project that they want to resubmit on was one of the top 167 projects out of 1,400 projects. The problem is, just because maybe streetcars were good in the first round doesn't mean that they're going to be good in the second round or the port project or whatever. I think we need to keep our options open and not put all of our eggs in one basket. And so we don't have a problem necessarily with the streetcar project, but to say that that's the only project that the city should submit, I think may be limiting for us.
And we certainly don't want to say that, because we certainly agree with you that we should put all options out there. So the direction today is about what, Maria, on this item?
Well, you have the motion pending before you, but we do have some other projects. I don't know what the process is, because the pre-application deadline is right around the corner, so I don't know what the process is for coming to council to get those as well.
Where are you on that, Jim Clark?
Well, we have a meeting tomorrow for the working group. Actually, what we hope to do out of tomorrow is be able to say, okay, we've gone through the reviews on these, we've talked about it, we know what the requirements are, what they're looking at, here's as much intel as we've got. We think that the following project should go forward and then be, either presented back to this committee, to council, even, we would like to eventually set up something for these kind of projects similar to what we did with,
In that
with the ad
context,
hoc.
would you rather us not direct it at this particular project, but wait until your analysis?
We would not like, I guess, preference would be that we think this is a good project, but there may be others as well, and not to just single out one particular project.
Okay, I think, couldn't we just receive and file this motion based on the information you've given us that it's already being considered in the city priorities?
It is being considered, and it's being actively
And
considered.
it's part of the mix. Okay, could I ask Jessica Worthington McLean, that's you, who is from Councilman Weezar's office. Would you speak, please?
Yeah, of course. As Mr. Clark mentioned last time in Tiger One, streetcars did very, very well.
yeah.
And we're absolutely in agreement with the mayor's office that we should not put all our eggs in one basket. That was the mistake the city made last time, and we got an egg, unfortunately, because we didn't get any money out of the round. So we really would think it's better for the city to hedge our bets. The streetcars may still be the darlings of the process this round. They may not. Goods movement may be the star of the day. We will be better off as a city to try a number of things. The process that Jim is talking about, we have participated in the process. It was just a little, actually quite unclear to us, and we couldn't get a clear answer on who was going to make the decisions of which projects were going to go forward, which were going to go, are we going to apply for one or more or what. We actually think that the harbor should go and we should go and other great projects
So
should
then,
go.
Mr. Parks' comment about note and file allows you to take on the record what we've discussed and for you to come back with the various options of us to act on. That's a motion by Mr. Parks. Do we have a second on that?
Yeah.
Second by Mr. Koretz. Any more discussion on
Just
that?
real quick, is there one track or two tracks down Broadway?
Currently in the plan, as it's envisioned and going through environmental, it's a one-track down Broadway that hooks over into the other parts of downtown.
Is there another track going the other way on another street?
On a different street.
Okay, Mr. Clark, you know how many bus lines are on Broadway?
No, sir.
It's the busiest bus line street in downtown. How many, Jessica?
Over 100.
100 bus lines. So I'm just saying, I remember when Mr. Bradley was in the infancy of trying to fight to get Metro Rail going and the Red Line, and they were going down Broadway first, but the owners, some of them did protest it. They moved to Hill Street. If we have limited dollars for the next 20 years, I don't know if we could do a streetcar. I just want to be honest in this situation here. I know we turned down a people mover in the 1980s that was fully funded by the federal government, turned it down for a variety of reasons, by other politics, not this city's politics. But the question I wanted to ask you, because I know bringing back Broadway is one of the number one objectives of Mr. Weezar. In San Francisco, outside where the trolley cars are, there are outside where the cable cars are, there are cable car looking like rubber tire vehicles that pass through. Have you thought of anything like that for Broadway right now?
The difference really between a bus, the rubber wheel vehicles, and the streetcar is the economic development potential that you have with a streetcar.
But you got 100 bus lines. That's more bus lines than anywhere in the city.
100
So,
bus lines serve the area.
right, but I'm just saying down Broadway, I don't know if they all go down Broadway, but whatever the case may be. I would just say for the flair of, because people do like, when transit, people do like trains, but there's a variety of issues with that. I would say if you wanted to try to accelerate, because it's going to be multiple years, I would get a rubber wheel type looking streetcar that would just start to canvass that area. And it's unbelievable how pretty Broadway is when you're in a different vehicle. If it's open air, people can see the beauty of the buildings. I just think if I have to fight, and I know the mayor talks about the subway to the sea. I want the subway to USC and Expo Park. I want the Vermont corridor from Wilshire to go south to that. And I'd have to fight for that first before I would fight for a streetcar, which is a noble thing. But anyway, I had to put that on the record.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Mr. Labange. So the motion that has been seconded is put all the options up, don't put eggs all in one basket, and I appreciate Mr. Weezar and your comment about that. So it's all on the table, but for the record, it's in the project list to be considered, right, Mr. Clark?
That's correct.
Okay, so we moved to note and file. You will create all the various options. You will bring it back to this committee. Do you have a sense of timing on that?
Well, July 16th is when the applications have to be submitted.
I see.
And our next meeting would be July 14th, so there really isn't time to
No,
do
there's no
that.
time. Can we ask you to do this in council, when we do the note and file, and maybe we don't bring it to council this week? Or what, how much time do you need to get this together so in council this can be discussed?
Well, if it's just that you would like a basically executive summary of these projects, I think that we can do in relatively
I think it's a
short-
summary of what projects you're recommending, the match funding, and how much we're asking is what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think we're going to be right up to the 11th hour in terms of actually getting the grant, because the grant applications are very complex about what they're asking for, and
So what would be your suggestion of our council meeting that we do this on when you have that data? How about?
we were going to do an ad hoc meeting on the 9th. This isn't really, at our ad hoc group was going to, I think, next meet on the 9th.
Well, that's kind of crazy. Why don't you do that before the council and let the council meet on the 7th or the 8th or the 9th and act on it so that you meet your deadline?
Okay.
So, Maria, what day would that make?
So, like the first week of July, the week of July 6th, right after the holiday, would you have something ready by then?
Yeah, we should, yeah.
Okay, then we'll schedule the item.
The 6th or the 7th?
Yes.
Okay.
The ARA meeting, the ARA group committee meets on the 9th, the morning of the 9th.
Yeah.
If you wanted to use that as a vehicle for, this isn't an ARA grant, but, no.
Well, this
no.
wasn't referred to ARA, so we'd have to get a referral. This isn't technically under their auspices because it's not stimulus money.
What would happen,
Part two.
committee members, is if the group comes forward with a list of projects, that report would be referred to the committee, Economic Recovery, and it would be presented to that committee.
No, it wouldn't, because this motion was originally scheduled for ARA and then was transferred to this committee, so this is...
This project, but if it's a broader project list of a variety of projects, I think it would
No,
go to
because this is Tiger 2, which is not subject to the ARA committee. That's where it gets sticky. If you
Well,
want
I
to use
disagree.
that as the vehicle, that is an option. You just need to refer that over.
All right, gentlemen, when do you want us to do this?
Well, we're ready the week of, whatever you'd like to do, if you wanted to go directly to council and do a presentation, or if you wanted to have the ARA committee vetted or whatever, if you can do that, then,
We don't need the art committee if
Okay.
that's all right, and the 9th is pushing it, so why don't we meet on the 7th or the 8th?
okay, yes, sir.
In council,
In council.
with the list. Okay. Okay.
So, any other new business, anybody? That in mind, meeting is adjourned. Jim, it's really going to be your presentation.
She asked for equipment.